Well, Venezuela's been very dangerous with drugs and with other things.
President Trump assembled military leaders and said they would be needed to fight the enemy from within.
At 2:14 a.m. local time, when a squad of U.S. special operators lay motionless in the mountain mist above Venezuela's western border, through the sticky darkness, the infrared scanners aboard an MQ-9 Reaper glided silently over twisted switchbacks of a narrow highland road. Below, 10 heavy trucks crawled forward, each cargo trailer wrapped in steel plating and cloaked in layers of chemical camouflage. Still, even the best camouflage could not hide subtle heat signatures picked up by precision sensors. In the hush, the assault team waited. One whispered command, "Green light, on my mark." For a heartbeat, everything held. Then the tension cracked. The silent mountain passed through a fulcrum of decision. That night, unbeknownst to those in the convoy, a bold U.S. strike would begin, targeting far more than just a drug shipment. No one watching from outside the operation knew yet how severe the fallout would be. Was this a routine interdiction, or something far more audacious? Why would special forces venture so deep into foreign territory, confronting hundreds of armed operatives to seize a single convoy? What made those heavily fortified trucks worth risking so much? If you want to join us in peeling back the layers of how the U.S. struck hard and fast, make sure to subscribe to Military Power. We bring you the untold stories behind military operations and secret warfare. As dawn hours fade into the humid Venezuelan highlands, the shadows of the Sierra Verde cartel stretch across Táchira's jungle slopes. This is not a simple drug gang. It is a power machine, a ruthless network that has carved control over one of Latin America's most dangerous corridors. Sierra Verde dominates western Venezuela's routes to Colombia and the Caribbean, moving illicit goods and influence through remote passes that seem forgotten by law enforcement. According to multiple investigative reports, the cartel's manufacturing scale is jaw-dropping. Some sources suggest Sierra Verde produces more than 40 tons of meth monthly, enough to flood U.S. streets many times over. Yearly revenues are estimated to reach $1.5 billion. These numbers are staggering, not just for their magnitude, but for what they imply. The group has logistical sophistication, financial reach, and boldness few cartels dare to claim. To move that volume of narcotics is no small feat. Sierra Verde employs specially armored trucks, camouflaged to resemble agricultural freight, and outfits each vehicle with radar sensors and GPS jamming systems. Even so, these high-tech defenses sometimes betray the operation. Small thermal anomalies or electronic signatures betray the presence of hidden compartments. Heavy steel cladding and chemicals may obscure sight and smell, but they can't hide everything. Here's the crux. On that fateful night, Sierra Verde loaded 76 tons of methamphetamine onto one convoy, alongside $220 million in cash, hidden in fortified crates. That level of simultaneous transport is almost unheard of. Cartels typically break shipments into smaller loads to minimize detection risk. So why would Sierra Verde gamble everything on one move? Could someone have guaranteed they'd pass unscathed? Or was it arrogance born of power? Over 6 tense months, U.S. agencies like the DEA, allied with SOUTHCOM and elements of JSOC, meticulously tracked Sierra Verde's finances, communications, and satellite signals. Intelligence teams followed money trails to offshore accounts, intercepted encrypted comms, and patiently mapped routes through mountainous terrain. Every piece of data mattered: a GPS ping, a bank transaction, a fuel purchase in a remote village. Together, they formed a map pointing straight at that night's convoy. And so, the pieces converged. When Washington concluded that all intelligence led to that single highway, and that the risk of delay could allow the cartel to reroute or receive warning, the decision was made. Strike now. They would commit to a bold move against Sierra Verde's nerve center deep inside Venezuelan territory. But when a cartel this powerful decides to move everything it owns in one night, did they really think no one was watching? Or had the hunt already begun from the sky above Táchira? High above the switchback road, An MQ-9 Reaper hung like a silent sentinel, its black glass eyes sweeping the dark. From that height, the convoy below looked ordinary at first. 10 heavy trucks, headlights muted, engines ticking in the night. But the Reaper saw what the human eye could not. Thermal signatures lit up like ghosts, warm seams where hidden compartments hugged chemical vats, faint heat pools that betrayed recently running motors, and metallic reflections that cut through low clouds when the drone's radar completed a sweep. Operators in the drone's control tent cross-checked every anomaly. They layered thermal maps over radar returns and flagged 3 trailers as high value. Those markers fed directly to the assault planners on the ground. In the trees below, 2 ranger squads and a SEAL element lay folded into the landscape, boots buried in leaf litter, weapons angled, breath measured. 2 Apache attack helicopters waited on pre-planned perches, rotors low, sensors primed. Voices were whispers. Coordinates flowed in the earpieces like a quiet river of commands. At 2:26 a.m., the decision came. Green light. In the space of 12 minutes, everything moved from surveillance to violence. The Reaper's operator held the feed like a pulse monitor, while the Apaches rolled their sensors toward targets. In one synchronized heartbeat, the kill box closed. Hellfire and 30mm fire ripped into the lead vehicles. Ground teams surged from concealment, racing along pre-cut paths to corral survivors and secure evidence. The assault was not chaos, it was choreography. Air and ground working in a single, merciless rhythm. This was classic Overwatch kill zone work. Fix the enemy in place with overwhelming, pre-registered fires, then close to finish. The tactic favors speed and shock. It leaves little time for commanders in the convoy to react, and fewer chances for reinforcements to arrive. For Sierra Verde, the intent was blunt: move a vast fortune in product and cash without pause. For the strike force, the plan was to break that movement before it breathed. Then a small, sharp alarm threatened everything. Midway down the column, a single armored hauler blinked. An emergency radio burst, brief and encoded, a panic signal sent from inside the convoy. In an instant, the clean plan stiffened. That beacon could call scouts, trigger roadblocks, or warn a nearby outpost. Commanders reacted. The Reaper widened its scan, Apaches reprioritized, and flank teams tightened their net. The forced improvisation tested training and nerves. The signal did not topple the ambush, but it forced the strike into a faster tempo. What might have been a controlled dismantling became a race against time. As tracer lines streaked and diesel trucks glowed orange under incoming fire, the valley filled with noise and heat. In those 12 minutes, a carefully set trap snapped shut, and a desperate tone from one truck revealed both human panic and how close the operation had come to unraveling. But as the last echoes of gunfire faded, one question hung in the air. Had the ambush truly ended, or was another strike still waiting to erupt from the dark? At 2:38 a.m., the silence over Táchira shattered. The first burst from the AC-130's 105mm cannon thundered across the valley, a deep concussion that rolled through the mountains like a drumbeat of judgment. In the infrared feed, each round looked like a comet falling to Earth, its arc ending in a blossom of fire that tore through the lead trucks. The air erupted with heat and light. Within seconds, the convoy's front line was gone, reduced to burning wreckage that lit the fog in violent orange. Downrange, cartel gunners scrambled out of the remaining vehicles. The Sierra Verde fighters were no amateurs. They moved fast, taking cover behind steel containers and returning fire with PKM machine guns and handheld RPGs. Tracers stitched across the dark, but the Apaches were already locked on. From above, their targeting pods tracked every muzzle flash. A single hellfire streaked downward, striking the slope beside an RPG team, scattering debris and shockwaves across the ridgeline. Each time the cartel fired, their position revealed itself, and each time the Apaches answered faster. On the ground, the special operators advanced in delta formation, overlapping fields of fire, pushing steadily up the incline. Their movements were methodical, almost surgical, clearing one flank at a time. Small arms cracked in rhythm with the deeper percussion from overhead. Through the drone's FLIR camera, the scene looked otherworldly. White-hot silhouettes darting between trees, bursts of heat marking explosions, and suddenly a blinding flare. One of the trucks, its trailer filled with compressed methamphetamine, took a direct hit. The detonation was instant and catastrophic. A column of flame and chemical smoke shot 100 meters into the sky, illuminating the mountain like daylight. The shockwave rippled through the camera feed, momentarily washing everything in static. That blast broke the convoy's cohesion. Cartel survivors scattered, some abandoning weapons, others trying to drag wounded men away from the inferno. The Rangers tightened the noose, cutting escape routes, while SEAL elements secured the rear. Each movement was guided by real-time data from the Reaper above, creating a perfect loop of coordination between the air and ground. This was the essence of modern combined arms warfare. Aircraft owning the sky, special forces mastering the ground, each amplifying the other's reach. Despite the chaos, American losses were minimal. Years of joint training in counterinsurgency zones had refined these teams into a single organism, adaptable, relentless, and efficient. The terrain was brutal, the night visibility poor, but digital maps and live drone telemetry turned the jungle into a controlled battlefield. The overwhelming precision left the cartel little room for improvisation. Within 20 minutes, their resistance thinned to sporadic bursts and fading echoes. From the command post, mission controllers watched the heat signatures collapse one by one. Yet, amid the fading noise, something didn't fit. The pattern of retreat was too clean, too fast, as if part of the enemy force had simply melted away rather than been destroyed. Operators on the ground found intact trucks, half-loaded, some engines still running, but with no drivers in sight. That uneasy realization hung in the air like smoke. Had the convoy been only bait? The battlefield quieted, broken only by the hiss of burning fuel and the low thrum of Apache rotors overhead. The team leader gave the signal to regroup and press northward toward the mountain's higher ridge. The data feeds suggested structures hidden beyond the next slope, buildings that hadn't appeared on any satellite pass. As the AC-130 circled for another scan, the question grew sharper in every mind. If this was just the decoy, then who or what was waiting for them on the summit? By 3:15 a.m., the gunfire had faded into the fog, leaving only the hiss of smoldering engines and the hum of rotor blades. The strike teams regrouped, pushing north along a narrow mountain pass guided by infrared markers from the MQ-9 Reaper above. The drone's sensors picked up something odd beyond the ridge, a faint, geometric outline under the tree canopy. It wasn't natural terrain. The feed sharpened, revealing structures buried in the hillside, angular and cold. The coordinates didn't match any known facility. Whatever it was, it had been built to stay invisible. The teams advanced in silence, boots sinking into damp soil. As they reached the plateau, the jungle opened to a sight few expected. 8 concrete bunkers embedded into the mountain, connected by steel walkways and partially covered with camouflage netting. Each bunker had ventilation shafts, a backup generator, and reinforced blast doors. The air smelled of solvents and ozone, a telltale trace of chemical production. Inside, hidden behind layers of heat-resistant walls, the cartel had built its crown jewel, an industrial methamphetamine complex capable of producing over 10 tons a week. The power grid was local and independent, drawing from underground fuel tanks. Thick cables ran between the bunkers, feeding an elaborate array of mixers, filtration systems, and pressurized cylinders. This wasn't the crude jungle lab many might imagine. It was precision engineering, closer to a pharmaceutical facility than a criminal hideout. Generators hummed quietly until one SEAL team cut the main line with a shaped charge. Sparks flared, the lights died, and in that sudden darkness came the crash of breaching tools and the thunder of flashbangs. Room by room, the operators moved in. Resistance was brief but violent. Sporadic bursts of gunfire, then silence. Within minutes, 22 cartel members were on the ground, hands zip-tied, faces pressed to concrete. Among them was a heavy-set man in his 40s, identified later as El Toro, Sierra Verde's field commander and one of the most wanted traffickers in the hemisphere. Exhausted, covered in chemical residue, he offered no fight. His capture sent a jolt through the command network monitoring the feed in Florida. They had just pulled the brain out of the cartel's regional operation. When dawn broke, the scale of what lay inside became clear. Stacks of sealed barrels lined the corridors labeled with false shipping codes. Piles of cash, bundled in US dollars and euros, were stacked waist high, totaling hundreds of millions. More alarming were the rows of hard drives and encrypted laptops found in the control room. Forensic specialists would later confirm they contained financial ledgers mapping a global laundering network that stretched far beyond Latin America. Money moved through shell firms in Hong Kong, real estate fronts in Panama, and logistics intermediaries registered in Istanbul. The digital fingerprints linked Sierra Verde to a chain of brokers capable of turning drug profits into legitimate capital within weeks. Between evidence bags and seized equipment, analysts uncovered another revelation. The lab's centrifuges and distillation units bore serial markings from Eastern suppliers. Some machine parts were traced to manufacturers in Shenzhen and Novosibirsk, routed through intermediaries to avoid export controls. What first appeared to be a drug raid was evolving into something larger, a portrait of a transnational web, where technology and capital flowed freely to sustain a criminal economy. The Reaper's overhead view captured the final act. Demolition teams planting C4 at key structural points, marking each bunker for controlled detonation. Before withdrawal, U.S. forces photographed every component, logged every chemical vat, and sealed evidence crates for airlift. The wind at that altitude carried the low, steady thump of generators winding down for the last time. Then, one by one, the explosives detonated. Fire rolled through the tunnels, collapsing steel doors inward and consuming the lab's machinery in orange bloom. As dust settled over the ridgeline, the operators stood watching through their goggles. They had dismantled more than a factory. They had erased the nerve center of a billion-dollar empire. Yet the discovery of foreign-made equipment left an uneasy silence on the comms. It hinted at something even more complex than cartel ambition, a supply chain that connected the Venezuelan jungle to distant boardrooms half a world away. And after uncovering the heart of Sierra Verde's empire, one question remained. How do you end something this powerful for good? At 4:05 a.m., the mountain shook. The charges were timed with surgical precision. Rows of C4 buried in the foundations of the 8 bunkers, each detonating in perfect sequence. The first explosion ripped through the central lab, throwing a plume of fire into the pre-dawn air. The next wave followed half a second later, a rolling chain of detonations that cracked the ridge like thunder. From miles away, villagers described the sound as a storm under the ground. For those on the slope, it was a physical force, heat, shock, and the metallic taste of dust filling the lungs. The mountain had become its own weapon, collapsing inward and burying what remained of Sierra Verde's empire beneath thousands of tons of rock. Above the chaos, the AC-130 made its return pass, engines low, cannons silent, but sensors still alive. Its operators scanned every contour of the battlefield for thermal signatures, any flicker of heat that could suggest survivors or hidden caches. The feed came back clean. The target zone, once alive with movement, now pulsed only with the slow cooling of debris. The cartel's last stronghold had gone dark. By the time the final blast echoed into silence, the toll was clear. 60 cartel fighters were confirmed dead or captured. The rest had fled into the jungle, weaponless, disoriented, and leaderless. Without their command structure, without the labs, the trucks, or the network that kept them funded, Sierra Verde's regional operations ceased to exist. 2 hours earlier, it had been a billion-dollar trafficking route feeding U.S. demand through Colombia and the Caribbean. Now it was a smoking crater, a broken artery cut clean from the criminal bloodstream. For Washington, the numbers told a story more powerful than any headline. 76 tons of pure methamphetamine destroyed before export. Over 50 million doses that would never reach American streets. Hundreds of millions in cash seized. The financial collapse of an organization that had once bribed politicians, armed militias, and traded openly in weapons as well as drugs. Yet officially there was no celebration, no press conference, no coordinates. The Pentagon confirmed a successful multinational counter-narcotics operation, but declined to identify where or when. Venezuelan officials issued denials. The region's local radio described it only as a mysterious series of explosions near the Colombian border. Behind closed doors, though, U.S. Southern Command marked it as one of the most decisive strikes in recent memory, an operation that not only crippled a cartel, but demonstrated that geography was no longer a shield. This mission was never about one convoy or one laboratory. It was about sending a message. The precision, the coordination, and the timing spoke louder than any statement. The United States had shown that it could reach deep into hostile terrain, strike with overwhelming force, and vanish before dawn without leaving a trace of presence. It was deterrence in its purest form, a demonstration of reach, resolve, and restraint all at once. Analysts later called it strategic signaling, a kind of quiet thunder meant to ripple through the underworld. Every cartel watching, from Mexico to West Africa, understood what had happened. Distance no longer meant safety. Satellites, drones, and data had replaced borders and bureaucracy. The mountain in Táchira was proof that the rules of engagement had evolved. As the last AC-130 banked westward and the special operators prepared for extraction, the sunrise broke through the haze, casting long shadows across the ruined slope. The scene was silent now, almost peaceful. But within that calm hung a single unspoken question. If this strike could erase a billion-dollar empire in 2 hours, who would be next? Somewhere beyond those ridges, other convoys were already moving, other labs still burning chemicals under makeshift roofs. And as the world began to learn what had happened in those dark Venezuelan hills, the quiet message from Washington was impossible to miss. There is nowhere left to hide. In the weeks that followed the strike, the shock waves spread far beyond the Táchira Mountains. The Sierra Verde network, once considered untouchable, collapsed almost overnight. Intelligence intercepts confirmed that its regional commanders had either fled across the Colombian border or gone completely silent. Local informants described ghost towns where cartel checkpoints once stood, their painted insignias already fading on crumbling walls. For years, Sierra Verde had ruled this terrain with guns, money, and fear. Now it was gone, its empire erased in less time than a morning news cycle. In Washington, the impact was immediate and measurable. Within 3 weeks, U.S. Southern Command reported a 60% drop in methamphetamine traffic entering South American transit hubs, a decline so sharp it rippled across financial channels tied to the trade. Supply lines that once flowed steadily through Venezuela, Colombia, and the Caribbean simply went dark. Banks flagged dormant accounts linked to the cartel's shell firms, and front companies in Panama froze under international scrutiny. For law enforcement, it was the clearest proof yet that the operation had done more than hit a single target. It had broken the rhythm of an entire economy of crime. Strategically, the mission marked a turning point. For decades, the U.S. had fought drug cartels through interdiction, chasing shipments, raiding labs, intercepting boats. This operation proved that the next stage would be different. The objective was no longer to seize product. It was to destroy infrastructure, technology, and finance. the pillars that made the trade sustainable. From encrypted transactions to offshore logistics, the fight had evolved into a campaign against the digital architecture of narcotics empires. Sierra Verde's downfall was both a tactical victory and a case study in how the U.S. now defines power, speed, precision, and invisibility. As the smoke cleared from the Venezuelan hills, one truth lingered. What began as a 2-hour strike had become a geopolitical message, a quiet declaration that distance, secrecy, and political boundaries could no longer protect those who profited from chaos. Across boardrooms and backrooms from Bogota to Shanghai, that message resonated. The reach of American power remains unmatched. And yet, beneath that triumph, a question still hangs in the air. Will the next phase of this shadow war unfold deeper inside South America, or shift to the financial centers that feed it? How far will Washington go to dismantle the machinery behind the cartels? Let us know what you think. And if you don't want to miss what happens when the next hidden empire falls, subscribe to Military Power, where we uncover the real stories behind the world's most secret operations, one mission at a time.